My name is Marcus Wellington, and I thought I knew everything about my life. At 42, I'd built a tech empire worth 8 figures, owned 3 homes, and commanded boardrooms across the country. But standing in my marble foyer at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, watching through the French doors leading to our back garden, I realized I knew absolutely nothing at all. What I saw would shatter every assumption I'd held about my son, about his caregiver, and about the walls I'd built around my own heart. You see, I'd come home early from a business trip to London. My flight landed 6 hours ahead of schedule due to favorable winds, and instead of heading straight to the office like usual, something pulled me home. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the conversation I'd had with my business partner about work-life balance. Or maybe it was just dumb luck. Either way, I'm grateful for whatever force brought me through that door at exactly the right moment. Because what I witnessed in my backyard wasn't just my 8-year-old son Samuel taking his first real steps. It was watching a miracle unfold, orchestrated by a 24-year-old woman who I'd barely spoken to beyond pleasantries and monthly payment discussions. Samuel was born with a rare condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, more commonly known as brittle bone disease. His legs are fragile, like delicate glass sculptures that could shatter with the slightest pressure. For 8 years, I'd watched my boy navigate the world from his wheelchair, and I'd made peace with the doctors' prognosis that he'd never walk independently. I'd thrown money at every specialist, every treatment, every experimental therapy that existed. Nothing worked. So I did what I do best in business when faced with an unsolvable problem. I hired the best help money could buy and delegated the daily care to someone else. Enter Sarah Mitchell, a recent graduate from the University of Denver's physical therapy program who'd responded to our job posting for a live-in caregiver. During her interview, she'd mentioned something about believing in possibilities beyond medical limitations, but I'd brushed it off as youthful optimism. I was looking for someone competent and reliable, not a dreamer. I hired her based on her credentials and references, signed her paychecks, and trusted her to handle Samuel's daily needs while I focused on running my company. For 6 months, our interactions had been purely professional. Good morning, Marcus. Samuel had a good night. His physical therapy session is at 3. We need more of his calcium supplements. That was the extent of our relationship. I was a busy father who loved his son but had convinced myself that the best way to help him was to earn enough money to afford the best care possible. I thought I was being responsible. I thought I was being a good provider. What I was actually being was absent. Standing there in my imported Italian suit, still carrying my leather briefcase, I watched Sarah kneeling in our garden beside Samuel's wheelchair. But here's what stopped me cold. Samuel wasn't sitting in his wheelchair. He was standing next to it, his small hands gripping Sarah's forearms, his face scrunched in concentration as he moved one foot slowly forward, then the other. I've seen billion-dollar deals close. I've watched stock prices soar and crash. I've experienced the adrenaline rush of high-stakes negotiations and the satisfaction of outmaneuvering competitors. None of that prepared me for the emotional earthquake of watching my son walk. Sarah's voice carried across the garden, gentle but encouraging. That's it, Samuel. Feel your feet connecting with the ground. You're not just walking. You're claiming your space in this world. Her words weren't clinical or technical like the physical therapists we'd hired. They were poetry wrapped in determination. Samuel giggled, actually giggled as he took another step. Sarah, did you see that? I'm like a superhero, but instead of flying, I'm walking. The joy in his voice cut through me like a blade. When was the last time I'd heard him laugh like that? When was the last time I'd been present for any of his small victories? I realized I'd been so focused on the big picture, on securing his future, that I'd missed his present entirely. Sarah matched his enthusiasm perfectly. You're absolutely a superhero, Samuel, and superheroes don't give up, even when things get tough. That's when I noticed the setup around them. Sarah had created an entire outdoor therapy course using items from our garage and garden. Pool noodles were arranged as gentle barriers to step over. A garden hose laid flat created a path to follow. She'd positioned mirrors against the fence so Samuel could watch his own movements and gain confidence. This wasn't just a spontaneous moment of encouragement. This was a carefully planned, professionally executed therapy session that had clearly been happening for weeks, maybe months, without my knowledge. But it was more than professional. The way Sarah looked at Samuel, the patience in her voice, the genuine celebration of each small step, it was clear she genuinely cared about him as a person, not just a job. I found myself frozen in place, afraid that any movement might break the spell of what I was witnessing. Samuel took 5 more steps before his energy flagged, and Sarah immediately guided him back to his wheelchair, with the same care and attention she'd shown during his walking. There was no disappointment in her voice, no sense that the session had ended too soon, just pride and promise. "Tomorrow we'll try for 7 steps," she said, adjusting his leg braces with practiced efficiency. "But today, 5 steps is perfect. You know why?" Samuel shook his head, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Because 5 steps is 5 more than the doctor said you'd ever take. And every step you take proves that the most important muscle in your body isn't in your legs." She tapped his chest gently. "It's in here, your heart, and your determination." I'd been standing there for maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like I'd witnessed a lifetime of small miracles I'd been too busy to notice. The guilt hit me like a freight train. How many other moments like this had I missed? How many times had Samuel achieved something incredible while I was in conference calls, or flying to another city for another meeting that could have been handled remotely? But the guilt was quickly replaced by something else: gratitude. And a growing realization that I'd hired Sarah to be Samuel's caregiver, but she'd become something much more important. She'd become his advocate, his cheerleader, and apparently the person helping him achieve what an army of expensive specialists had deemed impossible. I knew I needed to make myself known, but part of me wanted to keep watching, to understand more about this secret world of progress that had been happening in my own backyard. Sarah was now helping Samuel with what looked like strengthening exercises, using resistance bands attached to his wheelchair. Her technique was flawless, her encouragement constant, and her genuine affection for my son was unmistakable. "Sarah," Samuel said during a brief rest between exercises, "do you think my dad would be proud of me if he saw me walking?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Sarah's response was immediate and fierce. "Samuel, your father works incredibly hard to make sure you have everything you need to be healthy and happy. Of course he'd be proud. He's probably proud of you every single day, even for things that seem small. Sometimes grown-ups just have a hard time showing their feelings." She was defending me to my own son, despite the fact that I'd been an absent employer who barely acknowledged her existence beyond signing her paychecks. Despite the fact that I'd clearly been an absent father who'd missed months of his son's most significant progress. Her generosity of spirit in that moment made me realize how badly I'd misjudged not just her qualifications, but her character. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "I want to surprise him someday. I want to walk to his office and show him what I can do." "I think that would be an amazing surprise," Sarah replied. "But remember, the most important person you need to prove anything to is yourself. Your dad already loves you exactly as you are." I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped through the French doors, my expensive shoes clicking against the stone patio. Both Sarah and Samuel turned toward the sound, their faces showing surprise that quickly shifted to different expressions. Samuel's face lit up with pure joy. "Dad, you're home early!" Sarah's expression was more complex. I caught a flash of something that might have been concern, maybe even fear. Was she worried I'd be upset about the unauthorized therapy sessions? Did she think I'd disapprove of her methods? The thought that she might be afraid of my reaction made me realize how little effort I'd put into building any kind of relationship with the person caring for my most precious responsibility. I walked toward them, my mind racing with a dozen different things I could say. I could ask about the therapy sessions. I could question why she hadn't told me about Samuel's progress. I could inquire about her methods or demand a full report on his development. Instead, I found myself kneeling down next to Samuel's wheelchair, bringing myself to his eye level. "How long have you been working on walking, buddy?" Samuel's eyes got wide with excitement. "Sarah's been helping me for a long time, Dad. Today I took 5 whole steps. Want to see?" Before I could answer, he was already reaching for Sarah's arms, determination written across his small features. Sarah looked at me questioningly and I nodded. "I'd love to see." What happened next was a repeat performance of the miracle I'd witnessed from inside the house, but this time I was close enough to see every detail. The concentration on Samuel's face as he found his balance, the way his tongue peeked out slightly when he focused on each step, the trust he placed in Sarah's steady support, the genuine effort it took for each movement forward, and most importantly, the absolute joy he radiated with each successful step. When he completed 6 steps this time, one more than his earlier attempt, his cheer of triumph was so loud I was certain the neighbors could hear it. "Dad, did you see? Did you see me walking?" The pride in his voice was unmistakable, but underneath it, I heard something else. A desire for my approval that made me realize how much my opinion mattered to him, and how rarely I'd been present to offer it. I saw every single step, I told him, my voice rougher than I'd intended. "That was incredible, Samuel. You're incredible." As Sarah helped him back into his wheelchair, I caught her eye. "Sarah, could I speak with you for a moment?" I saw that flash of concern again, and I realized I needed to address it immediately. "Samuel, why don't you go get cleaned up for lunch? Sarah and I just need to talk about your therapy schedule." Once Samuel had wheeled himself toward the house, chattering excitedly about showing his walking to his grandmother the next time she visited, I turned to Sarah. She was standing with her arms crossed, clearly bracing herself for criticism or confrontation. Her body language screamed defensive, and I realized that in 6 months of employment, I'd apparently never given her a reason to expect praise or gratitude from me.